All right. So yesterday, Jon Stewart officially made his return to The Daily Show, where apparently he's going to be doing like the Monday shows and then other people are going to be filling in other slots. But he somehow, in his first monologue coming back, managed to piss off every single major liberal Twitter account and commentator that I've seen. So he basically was criticizing Joe Biden in the fairest way possible, to say that he is old and that his age is a concern for many voters, and maybe that's a problem if you are somebody who believes that Donald Trump returning to power is the greatest threat to democracy that this country has ever seen. So I'm going to play you guys a little bit of his monologue here, and hopefully YouTube doesn't take this down. But we're going to watch some of this, and then I'm going to show you guys some of the deranged freakouts that online liberals were having in response to this. So let's go ahead and jump into this real quick.
One thing we know for certain is this. We have two candidates who are chronologically outside the norm of anyone who has run for the presidency in this country, in the history of this country. They are the oldest people ever to run for president, breaking by only 4 years the record that they set.
Okay, so I mean, so far, pretty cut and dry here, right? He's going after both sides. He's going after Joe Biden and his obvious cognitive decline and, his age in and of itself. And he's also going after Donald Trump and all of the sycophants who defend Donald Trump and pretend as if he has no, signs of cognitive decline as well. So he's going after both sides. And I point that out here because it's going to come into play with some of the later clips that we are going to show from mainstream media pundits just absolutely losing their minds over all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and show one more part here where I think that he makes a pretty good point in terms of whether or not you believe that Joe Biden is competent enough to be the president for the next 5 years. This is a serious issue, and it is on the candidates to prove themselves to be competent to overcome the 80-90% of Americans who think they're too old to be president in order to win the next election. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
We're not suggesting neither man is vibrant, productive, or even capable. They're both stretching the limits of being able to handle the toughest job in the world. What's crazy is thinking that we are the ones, as voters, who must silence concerns and criticisms. It is the candidate's job to assuage concerns, not the voter's job not to mention them.
Okay, so I mean, this is a point that I make constantly on this channel, which is that regardless what the issue is, whether it's your age or whether it's your climate policy or foreign policy or whatever the case may be, it is on the politician to convince voters that they are a candidate worth voting for. Okay? It's on them. So anybody who has this mindset that voters themselves should just simply overlook any of the obvious flaws of any given candidate on either side of the political spectrum is utterly delusional. Okay? That's not how politics works. You don't just get to assume that you have the right to everybody's vote, and that anybody who dares to question Joe Biden being the candidate for Democrats in 2024, that therefore you're pro-Trump, okay? I mean, it's just utterly not only a ridiculous strategy, just from a principled standpoint, but it's also an ineffective strategy that is not going to win over any voters. You're never going to win people over who are concerned about Joe Biden's competency or his age by just insisting that it's no problem whatsoever. And again, it's important to recognize here, it's not just the age in and of itself that is the issue. It is that we have seen a precipitous decline in Joe Biden's cognitive abilities over the last number of years. I mean, everybody can see it. And so by just being in this state of denial over that is utterly ridiculous, right? And I'm going to show you one more clip here where he went after Joe Biden and his handling of Israel and his sort of tepid pushback to Israel's genocidal war inside of Gaza. So let's watch this as well.
By the way, the response in Gaza has been over the top. I like how Biden describes Israel's incessant bombing of civilians the same way my mother talks about the Super Bowl halftime show.
So, I mean, again, he's taking shots at Joe Biden, sure, but these are not the most aggressive shots he could be taking at Biden. And so now we get to this, right? So here's the backlash. The Rolling Stone wrote an article where they say, is Jon Stewart still the right person to host The Daily Show? The comedy vet makes his return to the desk after he left in 2015 this evening, but his both sides are equally bad approach may not translate to 2024. And this is kind of an encapsulation of many of the responses that we're going to get to here. But I mean, first off, you can go and watch, and I'll link it down below in the description, at the top of my description, if you want to watch his entire monologue. He did not say that both sides are equally bad. He did say that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are old, which they are objectively. I mean, who the fuck are we kidding here, guys? Joe Biden is 81 years old. Trump is 77 years old. Okay? They're both old guys. Now, you could have disagreements about how cognitively capable they are, but that part of it is objective. And again, we've seen the difference between how Joe Biden acts right now and his cognitive abilities at the moment versus how he was 10, 15 years ago. And it's night and day. But Jon Stewart, in that entire monologue, if anything, he had more smoke for Donald Trump than he did for Joe Biden. He was taking jabs, he was making fun of Joe Biden, but, he was equally going after Donald Trump as well. And his point there wasn't to say both sides of this equation are equally as dangerous to the country. His point was to say, if you believe that Donald Trump is a fascist, if you believe that Donald Trump is a threat to American democracy, then why would you put those stakes on the back of a historically, objectively weak candidate like Joe Biden? I mean, I've gone through all of the different polling data with you guys, right? I mean, you would have to go back decades and decades and decades ago to find a president running for re-election with a lower approval rating than Joe Biden has right now. It's hovering at around 38% at the moment, okay? That's lower than any modern president who was trying to run for re-election, let alone a president who won their re-election bid, okay? So he's a historically weak candidate, and Democrats just want to pretend as if that doesn't exist. As if the polling data is all inaccurate. Americans, 90% of whom almost, who think that he's too old, that's all just a right-wing talking point. And if anybody dares to criticize Biden on that front or on any front, then they're doing a both sides equation here. And it really is, it pisses me off, okay? Because if you really do care about preventing Trump from coming to power, then you would want Democrats to go with a stronger candidate. Not to just put a blindfold over their eyes and pretend as if everything with Biden is fine and that he's a strong candidate and that he has a likelihood of winning against Trump. He doesn't. I mean, that's a fact at this point. And so now we get to The View, who were, kind of losing their shit, going back and forth. We had Joy Behar here and some of her co-hosts, right? And let's just go ahead and jump into this clip because I got some stuff to say about this as well.
Offensive to me, I love that Jon Stewart is back, but what's so offensive to me is there's a difference between age and intelligence. Vitality. There's a difference between age and vitality. Yeah. There's a difference between age and really being up on things and having that quickness of wit that Joy has. Let me just tell you that Martha Stewart's 82. She's still cooking in front of people. Yeah.
She's selling kitty litter.
She's still, exactly. Robert De Niro and Al Pacino are getting it in. They've got babies in their 80s, okay? Jane Fonda, 86. Representative Maxine Waters, 85. Bernie Sanders, 82. Nancy Pelosi, 83. I don't know. They look like they know what they're doing. They have the wisdom. They have the history. The problem with this country is that we don't value people with their wisdom. We don't value seniors. We don't value octogenarians.
Okay.
And I'm sick of this ageism problem.
In answer to the first question, and then I'm getting to yours, I love Jon Stewart. I think he's hilarious, and I thought he hit a lot of important notes last night. One of the things you said last week, Alyssa, which was important, is it wasn't age, it was vitality. I don't have a problem with Biden. I voted for Biden. I'm an anyone but Trump, but I was voting for Biden anyway. But I also am honest about the gaffes I see people concerned with, which I think you can have both things right now. And I think that voters are concerned, and by telling them they shouldn't be, or that they're following a Republican narrative by listening to it, you're literally saying, like, close your eyes to what you're seeing, or you're making them feel bad for raising something. And as Jon Stewart said in there, replace age with vitality. He showed stammering in different points with each candidate and said the only record they're breaking as the oldest one is the record they set 4 years ago. So it is a fair concern to say this. We asked people to keep their eyes open on January 6th. I don't think it's fair to tell them to close their eyes to what they're seeing right now.
Okay, then don't close your eyes.
Okay. So, I mean, I find this clip just absolutely amazing because so many people on this panel are just like, full-throated Joe Biden supporters, stans, whatever you want to call them. She made a good point there at the end, right? Which is to say, like, whether or not you agree with people's criticisms, the fact that so many Americans, a vast majority of Americans, and even a majority of Democrats believe that Joe Biden is too old to run for re-election, that matters. And you have to take that into calculation, and pretending as if this is just some sort of like conjured up right-wing narrative that is based on nothing at all, that's not even going to help you electorally to overcome the narrative that you say is inaccurate, right? And I just find it amazing, right? I don't know what this co-host's name here is. I think this may be Sunny, if I'm not mistaken. But the idea that she is going to bring up somebody like Martha Stewart, okay, as a comparison point here, and say, oh, well, she's out there, she's doing cooking shows. She's, she's selling kitty litter or whatever the fuck. Selling kitty litter or doing cooking shows is not the same as being the single most powerful person on the face of the planet who has to make decisions that could or could not get us into World War III, for example. Those are kind of different stakes. If Joe Biden was just going around and started his own podcast or whatever, or started a biking show because he loves to go and ride those bikes in Rehoboth, Delaware, right? If he was doing something like that, nobody would be saying anything about his age. He could just go retire in peace. But he is running to be the president for the next 5 years. Okay, that's an entirely different equation that we're working with here. To compare that to like random older celebrities is just utterly ridiculous. Now, it's fair to compare him to like Bernie Sanders or Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters. I don't know that you want to compare him to Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters, but yeah, the age in and of itself is not necessarily the best metric. Bernie Sanders, he's old as fuck, but he seems to be completely mentally with it. I haven't seen any sort of signs of mental decline from Bernie Sanders, right? I have seen that from Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters. I have seen that from Joe Biden. But I mean, it's just a weird argument to me because they pretend as if we haven't seen any public examples of mental decline from Joe Biden. Like we have seen this repeatedly. I talked about it just the other day where, he's bringing up like Mitterrand and, these other guys from like the 1990s who he used to work with back in the day, the head of Germany and France and all of these other political representatives from various countries, and talking about them as if they're still alive when they died over 2 decades ago. Okay, that's not normal. That's not normal to bring up dead guys who died 2 decades ago as if you just talked to them on the phone the other week. That's not normal. Forgetting the word Hamas while you're in the middle of giving an update on a press conference where somebody in the audience has to yell out the word Hamas so that you remember it, right? These kinds of things are not normal. Just in the press conference the other day where Joe Biden was going out and defending his mental competence, he went out and he confused the president of Egypt, Sisi, with the president of Mexico. Okay, this is something that if you're a random old guy, okay, in the United States of America, that's totally fine. If you're the president of the United States, maybe there are some questions there that are entirely fair to ask, but they just act as if that's not happening, that it's utterly ridiculous. We also would hear from Morning Joe, who apparently, according to media I hear, is slamming the panic button, boasts about their own failing memories to defend Biden, saying we're all imperfect. Okay, so, I mean, you have all of these different networks. Now, this one wasn't necessarily in response to the Jon Stewart segment, but this one, I mean, you also have Morning Joe, which is apparently like the program, reportedly, that Joe Biden watches the most and listens to whatever Joe Scarborough, a former elected Republican congressman, by the way, has to say about everything. And so he's going out there and giving his sycophantic defense of Joe Biden and saying, well, we all forget things, I would forget when my mom died and things like that. So they're giving their defense. We also had just some people online on Twitter, right? Now, these are random accounts, so, don't go be mean to these people or anything like that, but just to give you some perspectives, right? I mean, this was one. I want the Jon Stewart who tore the GOP a new asshole for wounded veterans. I want the Jon Stewart who ripped the NRA nut job. What the fuck is this shit? And so it's like, I mean, do you just want him to be a partisan? I mean, is that what you want from Jon Stewart? I think the best aspects of Jon Stewart, while I don't agree with him on everything, I think that one of his best qualities is that he is able to see through a lot of the bullshit, and he's able to call out both sides, not in a bullshit, like, false equivalence kind of way, but in a way that is actually substantive and gets to the core of what's actually going on. But these people just want him to be somebody who only tears into Republicans. You can't criticize Democrats in any way, shape, or form, or else you're, I guess, a sellout or something. I mean, this was another one. Jon Stewart disappears for years to come back and to shit on Joe. I've seen this before. This is why we got Trump. Fuck you. Unfollow. I mean, come on. Hey, Jon Stewart, the one old guy is pro-democracy and the other guy is literally a fascist. We're seriously going 2016 both sides on this shit again? What the fuck is wrong with you? Jesus fucking Christ. The Daily Show is a fascist-enabling shit show. No, you know what is fascist-enabling? Is pretending as if Joe Biden is a strong candidate to defeat Donald Trump in the 2024 election. That is actually enabling a much higher likelihood of Donald Trump winning the election in 2024. Okay? But they seem to have this perspective that it's somehow like critiquing Joe Biden, that is going to cost him the election, instead of Joe Biden and his own failings, his own weaknesses. He has no weaknesses in their minds. He has no failings. He is the perfect candidate, right? And so if you criticize him in any way, shape, or form, then you're just a Trump supporter. You're a Trump enabler. I mean, it's just an utterly delusional mindset that is not only ridiculous, but again, it's not going to be effective. And we also had this here from this absolute freak show over here, Keith Olbermann, who says, well, after 9 years away, there's nothing else to say to the both sidedist fraud, Jon Stewart, bashing Biden, except please make it another 9 years, right? He also said this: if you're wondering how Jon Stewart's bullshit both sidesist, okay, stop, this is just a made up word here, both sidesist return went over, the anti-Semite racist conspiracy nuts loved it. So he's pointing out here that apparently Elon Musk liked this monologue. Okay, listen, I don't give a single solitary shit whatever Elon Musk likes or does not like, okay? But I mean, you can listen to the monologue. You can have specific critiques if you disagree on substance of anything that Jon Stewart said. That's totally fine. But just what? I mean, what are you saying? That Jon Stewart is somehow the implied anti-Semite racist conspiracy theorist here? Because what? Because he criticized his Israel policy? Because he said that Joe Biden is old and somewhat senile? I mean, that puts him in league with Elon Musk, apparently? Or that he's an anti-Semite? He's Jewish. I mean, he's literally Jewish. Right? No, but he's an anti-Semite, I guess, because he criticized Biden on Israel. I mean, we also had this here from Aaron Rupar. Jon Stewart still has it in some terms of being funny and entertaining, but the political content of this monologue is basically the New York Times op-ed page in TV form. Both sides are not, in fact, equally bad. Again, same as the Rolling Stone article. He did not say both sides are equally bad. Jon Stewart, if you sit him down and you ask him, or if you even listen to the monologue that he gave here, which was 20 minutes long, right, in its full version, he did not ever say that both sides are equally bad. Again, he said Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they're both objectively old. They both have shown signs of cognitive decline. That's the only sort of like both sidesing that he did in this entire monologue, right? But he even went into further details, honestly, I think disproportionately attacking Trump more than Biden. And obviously, Jon Stewart, on a personal level, would think that Donald Trump is a bigger threat to the country than Joe Biden being reelected. Okay, but they're just living in this delusional fantasy land. Any attack on Biden means that you think there are literally no differences between Trump and Biden. We also had this here, which was a compilation that was posted on Twitter, showing some of the recent coverage from mainstream outlets on talking about Joe Biden's mental capacity. So let's go ahead and watch a little bit of this. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing here.
If you're concerned about Joe Biden's age, you probably don't know Joe Biden.
Biden is actually in good shape.
Right. Mentally, he's quite acute.
Any aide who engages with him or reporters, we can see this. The gears of his mind are working.
The right-wing media has so fixated on Biden and Biden purportedly having cognitive issues.
It's not just making an issue of Biden's age. It's lying. It's saying he's senile. It's saying he's demented. Saying he's out of it.
Russian television has been filled with speculation about President Biden's age, about his mental state of mind.
That's an issue pushed by right-wing media, but it's not correct.
Yeah, Republicans on the other side have spent 4 years almost kind of weaponizing Biden's age against him. Trump is not that much younger than him.
Biden is just a couple of years older than Donald Trump.
Why so much attention on Biden's age? Trump isn't much younger.
This whole vein is really, really unseemly. I mean, ageism.
I'm going to say quite bluntly, there is some ageism going on here.
Yeah, I think there is some ageism going on.
I mean, guys, it's just... what do you even say at this point? I mean, it is so pathetic. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can do a sort of like whataboutism and say, yeah, well, Trump is not much younger. He's a couple years younger than Biden is right now, right? Biden's 81. Trump is like 77, 78 almost at this point. Yeah, I mean, he's not that much younger. Guess what? Trump also has significant signs of cognitive decline. I don't think either of them are qualified to be president for the next 5 years. I mean, they both might not live for the next 5 years, if we're being totally honest about it. So, I mean, what is the actual commentary here? That it's ageist to have concerns when Joe Biden is bringing up dead guys from 2 decades ago regularly on multiple different occurrences in just 1 week, okay? When he forgets the word Hamas, that exists in the first place? I mean, what are we really saying here, guys? Anybody who has been closely tracking Joe Biden has seen it in his press conferences, okay? Over and over and over again. Go back and watch the debates from 10, 12 years ago, whatever at this point. Okay, go back and watch those debates. Compare it to right now. There's no way you can possibly make the excuse that there has not been any sign of cognitive decline from Joe Biden or from Donald Trump. Okay, Donald Trump does the same shit all the time. Just the other day, he confused Erdogan with Viktor Orban, right? I mean, he does this shit all the time as well. So maybe both of them are unqualified. Do we really have to play this sort of like, partisan game where, no, my senile candidate is actually perfectly with it and yours isn't? No, my senile candidate is actually perfectly with it and your guy isn't. I mean, it's just it's bizarre. It is just a bizarre back and forth where it's almost like, it's like what they think like North Korean style, news propaganda is for Kim Jong-un. Like, that's what this comes across as to me. To just completely pretend as if there's no reality to this whatsoever. It's all just ageism. Ageism. I mean, really? Nobody would be saying this if Joe Biden had not put on display obvious signs of decline. Nobody is just pulling this out of their ass. We've all seen it on full display. I mean, more tweets here, right? Some of Stewart's jokes landed, but I would argue that the message of his monologue is the very last thing we need right now, unless you want 4 more years of Trump. It certainly didn't inspire anyone to vote. No, you know what's not going to inspire anyone to vote? Having Joe Biden be your candidate. That's what's not going to inspire anyone to vote. Not just because of his failures on his domestic agenda, okay? On failing on many major policy promises that he ran on to energize young people and other various constituencies that he's currently losing at the moment. It's not just because of that, but it's also because of things like his age, right? Joe Biden is not an inspiring candidate. He's not. He's currently obliterating his support with Arab Americans due to his support for a genocidal war inside of Gaza. And so to turn around and to just say like, well, Jon Stewart's monologue on The Daily Show isn't inspiring people to vote. What do you want from him? What do you want from him? Do you want him to go out there and say Joe Biden is a god king and we should reelect him for the next 20 years? I mean, what do you want him to say? You want him to suck his dick on camera? I mean, it seems like that's literally what some of these people expect. That somehow the politics game is played by pretending as if there is no possible valid critique of your preferred political party or your preferred political candidate. And anybody who dares to cross that line, even when they're also calling out the other guy on the opposing team's side, that anybody who dares to cross that line is now blasphemous, okay? And that they shouldn't be taken seriously. And they're doing a detriment. They're helping to get Donald Trump elected. And so I'll finish off with this one, which was maybe my favorite of any of these different responses here. So this is Fox News saying that Jon Stewart made this return in response to Greg Gutfeld's apparently wildly successful, comedy show, I guess you would put in quotations there, over on Fox News. So let's go ahead and watch this short little clip.
Do you think The Daily Show decided to do this because Greg's show's doing so well?
Absolutely. I definitely think that's one of the factors. And, I was watching the Emmy Awards recently, and Gutfeld was left off the list, where he's besting these people not only in writing, but ratings. So, yes, they're realizing that people in this country are frustrated. And people like Jon Stewart, whom I love, I worked with him at MTV. I think he's a great guy. I think he's really funny, and I'm glad he's finally an honest actor. But to Tyrus's point, it's taken him too long. But he and Bill Maher have finally realized that, they have to be truthful about what's going on, because carrying water for someone who is as decrepit as Biden is doing an incredible disservice to the country.
Yeah. Okay. So personally, if I was Jon Stewart and I got lumped into the same sort of like classification as somebody like Bill Maher, I would take personal offense to that. I think that Bill Maher is far more egregious in terms of his like high-minded centrist posturing that he does, and I'm smarter than everybody, and everybody on the left is equally as crazy as the furthest right reactionary like fascist MAGA guy that you've ever seen. So I think that Bill Maher is much more egregious in that sense. Jon Stewart, for the most part, he has some outsider takes, right? This is a guy who's, for the most part, anti-war, for like, going back to the Iraq war. This is a guy who is willing to criticize capitalism. He is willing to criticize corrupt politicians and things like that. But he also does have just like some standard libbed up takes. I mean, that's who Jon Stewart is. Again, he's not as egregious as somebody like Bill Maher or other, mainstream media, MSNBC talking heads. But I think that he does provide a different kind of insight that could definitely be valuable in a moment like this in American politics. And so it really really is just hilarious to see, number one, conservatives trying to take credit for this, as if Greg Gutfeld's comedy show on Fox News, where his audience averages an age of like 74, that is somehow the reason why Jon Stewart decided to come back. I don't think that has anything to do with it. But it's also amazing to see liberals just continuing to live in utter denial of reality, you know, in terms of Joe Biden's flaws, that if anything, you know, are not going to, pointing out those flaws is not going to lead to him being a stronger candidate. It's going to lead to a greater possibility of him losing to Donald Trump and allowing Donald Trump to be the next president. You cannot just put your head in the sand and pretend as if Joe Biden is this perfect candidate when the objective polling numbers are showing that he is arguably one of the single weakest candidates in modern American history.